Welcome to Out of This World. We are blasting off today with Dr. Brett Carolla and a little bit of faking gay space, mood madness. We've got cultural engineering studies. He is the editor of this awesome magazine, which actually features Jamie Hanshaw also in this issue. And I was writing about Mary Poppins, and in this same issue, he's got NASA and Hollywood Part 1, and coming out soon is another issue with NASA and Hollywood Part 2. So, how are you tonight, Brett?
I'm doing great. It's already out though. It came out
Oh, is
in
it?
it came out in June, and
Okay.
this is part two. It's a transhumanism themed
Mm-hmm.
episode, and we'll have the digital version out as well. People want to pay $30 and get a really slick print version and help our 501(c)(3. We'd appreciate that. But though the digital version will be out soon, my article already is one of the sample articles that's already out. You can go to the Decoding Culture Foundation website. You can read the whole part two, which is like three times as long almost as part one. Part one was really the prologue, I think, to part two, where I really give some of those explosive information and kind of present my grand unified theory of what's going on with NASA's collaborations with the film industry. So
Well, awesome, because a lot of stuff we talk about here is space related, alien related, NASA related. The prologue to your article, I would say, would be something like Jack Parsons and JPL Laboratories and the occultism going on there. And I don't know if you noticed, my whole channel's aesthetic is kind of based on this time frame, like the atomic age, Tomorrowland, retrofuturism. I don't know if you've like noticed the patterns and stuff going on my YouTube channel, but that's kind of the mood that I was trying to set is like spacey, but also a little bit comic book because those play a lot into what we're going to be talking about tonight too. So without further ado, let's just jump into in preparation for this, I just watched this old conspiracy documentary called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. Have you seen that one?
yeah, I have a long. It's been a long time, but I have seen that one. Yeah.
It's a classic. It was like 2001. It actually earned the maker a knuckle sandwich from Buzz Aldrin himself because he would go up in their faces and be like, "You're lying about the moon." And one of the astronauts actually, punched his lights out. So it's a classic, like a homemade documentary you can find on YouTube very easily. But it's all about, the Apollo program and Apollo 11. I mean, that's already, if you're an occultist, that that's going to pique some flags in you that they're using names of ancient gods and the numbers of magic. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, 11, right, is considered the number of magic, right? And especially in Crowleyan systems, and it's with 11 and a couple other numbers, but 11 might be the most important number in the Thelemite Crowleyan
Mhm.
system. So if we're and nine, right? So 9, 11. Um,
Right, right. And so there were 13 Apollo programs. Do you have a theory of why they were using the name Apollo?
no, I mean, I didn't really go at it from this angle,
Uh-huh.
actually. I mean, I have a, I mean, I'm vaguely aware, and you're even more aware, right, of all of the kind of occult overtones and undertones surrounding NASA, and they name everything after pagan gods, and I mean, I really just came at this trying to understand what, like, actually just trying to gather evidence on what we could find out about NASA's relationship to the entertainment industry. I don't, it's like, and I'm not trying to be coy at all. I don't have an opinion on whether we've gone to the moon ever, whether maybe we went to the moon after Apollo 11, but not Apollo 11. Maybe we went to the moon, but what I have become away convinced of looking at a lot of this evidence, and I think it's more or less owned now that there's a lot of fakery in the publicity, photographs, and certain things, and the moon footage from Apollo 11, not that there was the moon footage, like I can't make anything of that.
Hmm.
And people may or may not know this is going to come up in the course of my presentation anyway, but they like erase the moon tapes.
Right.
So there's something entirely suspicious there. And it's coming through a like your people were watching it on a TV inside of a TV. So none of this really makes any sense. We can't really make out anything in that footage anyway. And I think it's been shown that a lot of the publicity photographs on. But what I found in my research though is that, and this goes to the occult side of it because it all comes back to that, is that whether or not the moon landings were real, NASA has been intimately involved themselves in propagating the hoax theory, the moon hoax theory, as you discovered probably if you didn't already know when you watched Fly Me to the Moon, which was a film fully supported by NASA, one of only about a less fewer than a dozen movies that signed what was called a Space Act agreement
Hmm.
between NASA and a production company, which basically gives NASA control over the final product or what's there. The portrayals of NASA, since that movie's all about NASA, it basically gives them total control over the movie, and it's a movie that portrays the moon hoax theory. But there's other examples of that. And NASA has been involved in propagating the hoax. So out of one side of their mouth, they're saying you guys are a bunch of tinfoil hat lunatics. And at the side of their mouth, they're the ones actually promoting that, which, yeah, I think is a very occult thing going on there.
Oh, there's definitely a lot of prestidigitation going on. And you brought up that movie Fly Me to the Moon. So this is starring Scarlett Johansson as a sort of ad agency queen who is hired by the government to fake the moon landing. Even though the real moon landing in this movie is happening, they want to get out ahead of anything that could go wrong because it was too important in their, space race with Russia, right? To lose face and not have the Apollo 11 land on the moon. And in this movie, they're showing you how they coupled NASA with advertising agencies like Omega Watches, Tang, all kinds of ad campaigns came out in 1968, 69 promoting going to the moon, like astronauts wear Omega watches and stuff like that because now space is popular, right? And in the movie, they are faking the landing. While the real landing is happening, she has to switch the feed to the real landing. So there's a lot of layers of deception going on here, and in the end it's telling you we did get the actual real footage from the real landing, but just lampooning the idea that they could actually fake something like this. But I don't know if you've seen the footage where they just went to the moon, supposedly India did.
No, no, I haven't seen the
Oh, that
India
looks
going to the
super
moon.
fake, man. Like it's are you even trying? So, what we're going to be discussing, and this is probably going to end up being a two-part episode because there's so much to talk about, is, fakery, trickery, Hollywood productions w in um, what's the word? Cooperation with NASA and the government. And you actually went to Washington, D.C. and got some of these records and files, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I went to Georgetown University, which houses the Lawrence Suid files, SUID, Lawrence Suid. And Lawrence Suid was this historian who became close friends, associates with a guy named Donald Baruch. And Donald Baruch was the Pentagon's chief liaison to Hollywood from 1949 until 1989. So for like 50 years, this guy, he was the guy, and he comes from an elite Jewish banking family. His uncle Bernard Baruch ran the World War I economy, he was a major financier. So he comes from this powerful banking family that's also been involved in doing things like introducing jazz music and cultural engineering, right? From our perspective. Well, anyway, so Suid is very controversial within what we call the Hollywood DC research community, this kind of relatively restricted number of people who research the relationship between Hollywood and Washington DC. And Suid is considered, basically a mouthpiece of Donald Baruch and somebody who is kind of an inside man and the government's man. Some of the criticism is a little bit unfair. I do think in some ways he's a good historian and he's rigorous in his way, even though he has a kind of narrow frame. But yeah, he was definitely, I mean, Baruch wrote him letters of recommendation and supported his career, and he gave him exclusive access to his office's files so that no other and Baruch, I'm sorry, Seward sat on these files, the all of the various memoranda and agreements and script notes and all these things that he had access to for his books, Guts and Glory, the making of the military image in Hollywood and Sailing the Silver Seas, the one he did in the Navy and stuff. And he sat on these records. Now, Seward also wrote, no, so he never actually published it, but he did write a bunch of it because I got a hold of some of the manuscript. But he was commissioned by NASA in either the late 70s or early 80s to write a cultural history of NASA. And at some point along the way, the chief historian of NASA canceled the contract. Now, his NASA, that manuscript I actually got through Baruch University, or I got part of it. They sent me the two chapters where he writes about NASA and Hollywood, chapter 6 and chapter 7. Chapter 7 is all about 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Hmm.
And it was sort of Baruch University, like they started ghosting me. I said, well, can you send me the whole manuscript? And and they just ignored me after this. They gave me these two chapters and then they started ignoring me. It was weird. I even got Matt Alford, who's one of the leading researchers in this Hollywood DC community, to start writing them too. He got nothing back. It's strange. But most of the records, including interviews and many kinds of memoranda and files and stuff that people can view on our website on the records section are at in the Seward archives at Georgetown. So that's why I went to get every NASA related record
Hmm.
I could. So after Seward died in the last 10 years or so, those archives have opened up, but he
Hmm.
sat on them for years. So that really hampered all of the research into what's the government been doing, or especially what the Pentagon has been doing with Hollywood, because no
Hmm.
one could get hold of these records until fairly recently. That's why it's only in the last 20 years or so, beginning with David Rob's Operation Hollywood, that there's been a lot of writing on Hollywood, DC. And I found, so when I got into this, I saw that, okay, there's been a lot on the Pentagon, even the CIA and Hollywood. There's more and more of that. But what about NASA and Hollywood? Because there's like no agency that's more, as that movie Fly Me to the Moon shows you, that's more occupied with the image making industry and that side of things than NASA. And what do we know about NASA's relationship to Hollywood? I found nothing out there. So I started doing the research. So yes, I went to Georgetown, but even before that, and that was for part two.
Hmm.
But for part one, I started making Freedom of Information Act requests, FOIA requests, because nobody else had been doing this apparently. And I obtained, these are things people can see on the Decoding Culture Foundation website. If you go to the records section, all of this is made public. But I've obtained lists for all of their I think it's like 700 or some collaborations that we have total. But most of those are what we can document from 2005 up to now, which is when Bert Ulrich, who's the current media liaison at NASA, opened his office, and I got lists, I got Space Act agreements, including for Fly Me to the Moon, which is when they enter into a fully cooperative relationship with the production.
Hmm.
Uh, and so, yeah, I obtained all of those records. So I'm hoping other people will carry on this research, but basically, I'm sort of the expert on this because I've obtained most of the records, and I'm the one that's gone into Seward's archives and seen all of this stuff,
Hmm.
and I got that manuscript, and so if I dare say I'm on the cutting edge of NASA Hollywood research.
Oh, yeah, awesome. And this is really important too because a lot of money goes into funding these programs. And in that documentary, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to Moon, they were talking about the Apollo 11 mission um, cost $135 billion when adjusted for inflation. So, and that was in 2001. So, there's a lot of money on the table here, billions of dollars in profit for contractors, people who contract with NASA, movie people. Um, and is it all just for show, or is it something real going on in space? Because I'm not convinced that we actually went to the moon. There's so many reasons that, a spacecraft maybe couldn't get past the Van Allen radiation belt. The lighting on the moon from the footage that we see is really suspect. There's no stars out there. It's like, why would they do that whole production without stars in it? And it's because, well, that's too precise because you could literally pinpoint anywhere you are in our solar system by the positioning of stars. So, is this all just like a sophisticated movie, or are we really going to space? So, what you're focusing on is the cultural control aspect of it and or not inoculating, inculcating all of these generations of children to think about space, going into space, imagine being astronauts. And in part one of the NASA's origins, you point out that they are intertwined with Walt Disney.
Yes, indeed. So, kind of the prehistory of NASA involves the entertainment industry. I mean, NASA comes into existence on the heels of this publicity campaign that Disney was part of. So, and there was the Disney, it was called the Disneyland TV show at the time. It changed names, right? Disney Television. Originally, it was called the Disneyland TV series. And in 1955, a film called Man in Space comes out. It was a short film that was aired as part of the Tomorrowland feature segment on the TV series, and this became one of a series of films of the Tomorrowland series. The first three of which are about space travel. So 1955 is Man in Space, and then another one in 1959, Man in the Moon. And then there was another one in 1957, which is the Mars one. Now they were adaptations of a series of Collier's articles that Werner von Braun and some other scientists, including some other Operation Paperclip, former Nazi scientists,
Here's
yeah, participated in. And it was all
here's a
about drumming.
picture of Werner von Braun and Walt Disney
Mhm.
together. And this is from my book that I don't sell anymore, but we have gone over this in the live streams. But yeah, right there, Walt Disney and Nazi scientist Werner von Braun, who brought over other scientists with him in Project Paperclip, like you just said. And they even called him, you said in your article, the America's Space Prophet.
Yeah, so I mean, this is where von Braun just America just caught space fever, as I think I put it, watching von Braun. And many historians have talked about this. He was just this blonde, good-looking, optimistic guy, and he was telling us that we're going to the stars, and we're going to go to Mars, and we're going to conquer space. And this was all, though, a calculated campaign involving Walt Disney, um, military contractors, and the military itself to drum up support for a civilian space agency.
Hmm.
And the Ward Kemble was the animator who directed it, and Kemble says that Eisenhower borrowed the show, the first one, Man in Space, to run for the Pentagon as a kind of space primer. What's very misleading about this, you can watch the film itself and the acknowledgments at the end. In fact, the only acknowledgments are for the U.S. Department of Defense, and then every branch of the Army, Navy, everybody is acknowledged there. So the military helped create the film.
Hmm.
Now, subsequent films, Man in the Moon and the Mars one, I can't remember what the title of the Mars one is. Uh,
Uh, Man in Space, Man and the Moon, and Mars and Beyond.
yeah, Mars and Beyond. There it is. Um, those don't have the after the first one, it doesn't say, there's no acknowledgement given to the military, but there's acknowledgement given to contractors. I think I list what the Douglas aircraft, for example, the military contractors. And this just becomes kind of a leitmotif when you start to study Disney and the military and NASA. They're just deeply, deeply, deeply intertwined. You know, Monsanto and
Hmm.
Disney. these military industrial contractors and NASA. And one of the things that NASA, has been insistent on in its relationship with the entertainment industry is they want to be portrayed as having nothing to do with having military applications. And so, yeah, this is a collaboration between Disney and the government and von Braun and all these people from very early on. And there's this effort to obscure like what's really behind it, right? And why they're doing this. There's an ongoing effort, right? But this relationship with Disney is up to the present day between NASA and Disney and NASA, Hollywood, and Disney. The movies we'll perhaps talk about from the 80s, A Flight of the Navigator being one of the most disturbing examples
Mhm.
um, of this. But yeah, so it really begins, in a sense, NASA begins with the entertainment industry. Um,
Well, you said that Disney links the entertainment industry to the military industrial complex, right? And here we are talking about, I call it Disney World of Warcraft because as soon as Pearl Harbor happened, Disney Studios was taken over by the army, and it was pretty much used to just make propaganda films and military training films and maybe some kind of MK Ultra type if you want to like go there like we do. But they are definitely on like using psychology and these little cartoons and vignettes to program young kids. And Disney worked with the FBI very closely. He was embedded in also he was in the army as a child. So all of that stuff you can go check it out on my live stream tab under I think it's called Disney World of Warcraft. But yeah, they said he's the link between this entertainment industry and NASA and Monsanto and Tomorrowland, and not a lot of people know that uh, Disneyland was built to sell you things and sell you dreams of tomorrow and use your imagination for occulted purposes. And so if you hate like GMO crops and all that like stuff that we were talking about in the early 2000s, that's all Monsanto, and Monsanto was partnered with Tomorrowland, where you would get your like plastic houses and irradiated foods, and this idea of going into the Jetsons future, right?
yeah, and I think what's very deceptive about this, like some people, might even say, "Hey, what's the problem here?" They might be very nostalgic for this like 1950s retro futurism and this Disney Americanism, but um, first of all, it's not an accident, that Disney goes from kind of peddling a vague kind of abstract Americanism and patriotism during this phase of the Cold War to now peddling what you see now. I don't believe it's because there's been some fundamental transformation in what Disney actually is. You'll find too what's bizarre is that these military contractors will support all kinds of globalist cinema, including ones that the Pentagon wouldn't support, like the War of the Worlds film, for example, which couldn't get support from the Pentagon, but gets supported by military industrial contractors. And NASA is involved with films that later during the period where NASA is an agency after 58, NASA is involved in coordinating support from all these military industrial contractors. Now, why would military industrial contractors in the United States, Douglas Aircraft and Northrop and so on, why would they support movies that are pushing globalism and are portraying the Cold War and the space race and things as just sort of jingoistic patriotic nonsense. It doesn't
Mhm.
make any sense. As it's not going to make sense why NASA would support, why would NASA would support movies like Countdown and Maroon that we can talk about from 1967, 1969. We're told that we're at the height of the space race, and yet they're supporting movies that portray the space race as dangerous chauvinistic madness, and pushing for international cooperation, and the Soviets are the good guys, and there's a false version of history. Even the Sputnik thing, right, is false. There was no real panic in the upper echelons around Sputnik. Oh no, the Soviets are going to militarize space. Sputnik came out of a mutual cooperation between American scientists and Russian scientists. And just as you see the 1975, what was it called? The Apollo, I can't pronounce the Russian very well, Soyuz, Soyuz initiative, where there was a joint mission carried out with the Soviets and Americans, which is being anticipated by the movie Maroon from 1969. And there's evidence, in fact, that that movie was actually being used to push for this sort of international cooperation. And we'll find Arthur C. Clarke in the middle of this and getting ahead of ourselves. But I just caution people like not to sort of buy into the veneer of retrofuturist Americanism space race behind this. Is there's a lot more going on. And spoiler alert, it's the globalism, it's the Anglo-American establishment that's in the background of it.
Hmm. And so you've got Disney Von Braun, Tomorrowland's collaboration was a pillar of a campaign to drum support for the creation of a civilian space agency, or something that looked like a civilian agency. And this was NASA. Um, Another one I'm thinking of is, have you ever been to Epcot in Florida?
When I was a little kid, I was at Epcot and like the main thing I remember, and it's weird because I was so frightened on the Space Mountain ride. And I just remember I was with my grandparents. I was probably like 5, and I was just like clutching at their ankles. I was so
Hmm.
afraid on the ride. And like, when is it going to be over? And it's like I blacked out whatever was on the ride.
Yeah, you
Uh,
dissociated your trauma from that.
yeah. That, and I was waiting out in the rain for Mickey and Minnie and everything, and it didn't sound like they were going to come, but then they came
Oh,
out
okay.
in the rain. That's about my only memories of that. Yeah.
Well, Epcot, I mean, as you probably know, stands for Experimental Prototype Civilization of Tomorrow, or City of Tomorrow. Um, and that's a whole nother thing. But Mission Space is actually where they shoot you to slingshot around the moon, and you come back, and they even show you the crater on the dark side of the moon that was named after Jack Parsons.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's one of the more realistic rides. And I'm thinking, all of these like missions to space, and you know how they just shot Katy Perry and Jeff Bezos' wife into space a couple months ago. Remember that thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, how many of these are complete hoaxes, or they're just going up into low Earth orbit? Um, because this Disney ride, like, if you didn't know any better, if they tried to make the entrance a little bit more realistic, you would have thought maybe I have taken a space ride. Like, how sophisticated can these things get? So can they in the future maybe take money from unsuspecting rich people who want to get shot up and come back, and they never left like some base or something? I don't know. I'm just playing with ideas here because this is the level of like hoax and trickery that we are dealing with.
So yeah, and so many of these movies that NASA supported over the years, and we can get into how I know that they supported them. It was like Capricorn One, which used
Hmm.
Marshall Space Center, um, Space Camp from 1986, and like Future World from 1976. So the movies are all about how the real thing can easily be confused with simulation, whether it's a media simulation for the public
Hmm.
or whether it's like literal flight simulation. Do you know it's real or not? I guess Flight of the Navigator, which we mentioned, is another example of that. And I mean, what was the ride? The Star Tours ride at Disney. This is a Star Wars thing. That was like NASA, but Star
Yes,
Tours,
I
which
remember
was
that. Where you get
yeah,
to pilot your own little thing, or you're on the crew.
yeah, they used military flight simulators were purchased from the government. Military flight simulators were purchased from the government to simulate that. So this is an ongoing theme, which eventually sort of takes you into the mind control territory of this, and people who think they were abducted by aliens or flew out into space or whatever, right? Are they actually the victims of mind control? I think that's the subtext of Flight of the very disturbing subtext of Flight of the Navigator, which is this Disney NASA supported movie from 1986. But again, also, of course, that's central to Fly Me to the Moon. This idea of, oh, Maybe the moon landing's real, maybe it's not, maybe space is fake, maybe it's real, but either way, we can make you believe what we want to make you believe, right? And
Right.
there's the occult magical aspect of it that we can use the power of imagery and perception manipulation to convince you of anything, whether it's real or whether it's not real. And uh, that's sort of been there. I mean, that's sort of implied by those early Disney films, Man in Space and Man in the Moon, because they're those and a series of movies that were made in collaboration with the Air Force before NASA officially existed as an agency. They were like trial runs to like what is it going to look like, and they look surprisingly like the supposed real moon landing is
Hmm.
to look. It's like it's preparing people to understand what this is going to be like, how it's going to go down. The other thing I was going to say is that with the military, it's like if you watch, and they're really well done, like those Disney movies. I mean, Disney, the quality of those movies is very, very. Disney was I heard you talking with your frequent guest Paul. Um, what is his last name? I'm sorry, I
Paul
was
Hall.
Paul Hall. Yeah, I knew it right. Paul Hall. I enjoy. Yeah, like the stuff that was Disney was putting out in that period was very, very high quality. But in that Man in Space, it's like, and Man in the Moon too. This is all a civilian thing, and it's all about these sort of high ideals of exploration and a bold new future and peace. And yet, like everything involves shooting a rocket at something. It involves lots of
Mm.
rockets. Like it's like what else might we be doing,
Hmm.
with these things? So.
Have you seen that Heinlein goofy one, Starship Troopers?
Mhm. Yeah, it's been
So
a while, but yeah, I mean, Paul Verhoeven
yeah.
directed that? He's a psyop artist. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Total Recall. So one of the little things that people miss in the beginning of that movie is that it starts out as advertisements for joining this space army and that's how you earn your global citizenship. So good global citizens sign up to fight the bugs with the space army, and then they get shot into space and slaughtered on the bug planet. But that was just one of those little like foreshadowings that science fiction puts in there is like maybe in the future you're going to have to earn some kind of like status or citizenship by fighting in space or joining the global space force or there's all kinds of room, and we can talk about this all night because I love talking about aliens and stuff, but when the fake invasion comes, there's going to be like people rushing to join up to fight this threat, right?
Yeah, and we're not going to know whether it's real anymore because you're going to be, in Neuralink and a Coon pod. And
Yeah.
they'll send you on it's be total recall. You'll be sent on missions to Mars and all of reality. And it'll all be, it'll all be blurred. Like the great transhumanist Yuval Harari says, there'll be no difference anymore between fiction and reality. We'll just be able to implant fictions in you.
Hmm.
And I think, and it's just that becomes just it's obvious that NASA has been involved in in that kind of and those themes and their collaborations for a very long time.
Well, let's talk about Tomorrowland the movie real quick, because this is George Clooney, who's a CFR. He's a WEF globalist. He's buddies with Obama, like close friends that with Obama. And you mentioned that this is all about technocracy, climate agenda, feminism, AI, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, people might think that um, this is an example of the retrofuturism being hijacked by the WEF globalist left, but in fact, Disney's been collaborating with UNICEF, for example, on the "It's a Small World" ride going back to 1964. So it's not really true. I mean, my view is that the the I kind of think pseudo-Americanism and pseudo-traditionalism that Disney was pushing in that era really just had to do with the dialectic of the Cold War.
Hmm.
That's why it was just such a sort of abstract, Americanism that could easily be left by the wayside later on. But so the Tomorrowland film starring Clooney, which is a film that signed a Space Act agreement with the agency. So that's
And
one of
so you mentioned that Space Act agreement, that was how they share sets with each other, right? These are like films like The Box, Tomorrowland, Transformers, The Avengers, Space Warriors, The Martian, Hidden Figures, First Man. And in your article, you were talking about how uh, NASA has access to all of their sets, and the Hollywood has access to what they need from NASA. So this is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and NASA has veto power over how they're portrayed. And it actually says in the act that the final version of those portions, what is I'm looking at trying to look for the language here, but you cannot portray NASA as an evil, yeah, as an evil or corrupt agency, for example. So if in the final edit, they have, I mean, they get control over the final edit of the film, so they approve the script, and then if you try to like sneak a fast one on them, they have veto power over how NASA is portrayed and how the symbols are used. And essentially, it's similar to agreements made with the Pentagon and military agencies that they basically have creative control. They have
Mhm.
veto power over things and creative control. And so Tomorrowland is truly a NASA film, and that they just worked very, very closely with the production. Again, NASA supports hundreds of different productions. We can discuss what that amounts to and how all that works. But Tomorrowland is one of those should be at the top of the list to be understood as a movie that's essentially made by NASA. And it is, yes, it's as you analyzed in an episode that you did with Paul on that one. It's just got it just checks every single box of, climate agenda and AI and feminism.
The good AI saving us from the bad AI. That's another theme that they use a lot.
Yeah, and I think it's got, again, disturbing themes or subtexts of this blurring of the boundaries between fantasy and reality and kind of coded dissociation, and stuff like that. And yeah, Clooney is in, yeah, gosh, look at his recent filmography, too. Like just, I mean, Clooney is really just a shill of the New World Order. And yes, he's a lifetime member of the Council on Foreign Relations, along with Angelina Jolie, for example. So yes, you get NASA, and that's just one exhibit in the sort of argument that NASA is on team globalism.
So, well, it's funny because it gives a small world a new meaning when you think of what UNICEF does when they push these, like, stabbies and other policies that render people infertile and depopulation agendas. So it just kind of gives another, like, meaning to it's a small world. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
that too. Um, yeah, and it's like, what is it? What is it in the movie? Essentially, I'm trying to. It's been a while since I reviewed it for part one. Um, but yeah, basically we've messed up the future. We don't. This is a theme of all these things too, right? Like the remake of sorry, not War of the Worlds, but The Day the Earth Stood Still.
Hmm.
That we really don't deserve to live. That humans are no good. That Depop.
Hmm. And they also work with Gene Roddenberry uh, back in the day, right? And so this is interesting because we did this show about 6 months ago with Baselit Analyzer about Stargate conspiracy, talking about channeling of the nine and the channelings from Sirius. And I'm sure NASA is all involved in this kind of woo-woo stuff, but they actually thought they were channeling, nine ancient gods from Egypt. And Gene Roddenberry was very much involved in this, and he had an exclusive relationship with NASA, right?
Yeah, indeed. Roddenberry, I found so a little bit of background here, like almost all the documentation you can find with regard to NASA's relationship with Hollywood, it's like between 2005 and now, Bert Ulrich's office. And where records that aren't within the retention schedules of the various agencies, they're supposed to be stored by the National Archives, NARA.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, So I went to NORA and I requested all records. I requested specific movies that I knew were filmed in NASA facilities like Space Camp or Capricorn One and stuff. Couldn't get anything, and so I ended up getting like bumped up the chain of command at the National Archives to the person who was represented to me as the foremost specialist in NASA records. And they have literally, not literally, because there's this one letter with Gene Roddenberry that they found, but other than that, it was like absolutely nothing pertaining to NASA's many collaborations with Hollywood. And the way he explained it was that these records had to be categorized in the most temporary category, which is completely inappropriate. And I know they did it deliberately because the most important document, perhaps, that I got from Seward's archives was this AMPTP memo, American Motion Picture Television Producers memo, that outlined the policy of NASA's cooperation with the entertainment industry. And one of the things in there is they don't want to be credited. They
Hmm.
don't want you to
Oh,
know.
yeah.
Usually, if it's like the Army, the Navy, the Pentagon, like they want to be credited. But NASA doesn't want to be credited. And then I can see that they went out of their way not to have these records retained. So I got this one document, which was this letter from 1977, where Gene Roddenberry is, it's not even a letter by Roddenberry, it's a letter to Roddenberry from the agency, from the media relations. And Roddenberry has evidently requested support on what was supposed to be supposed to be like a reboot of the Star Trek TV series or a new part Star Trek phase two, or whatever they called it. It ended up becoming the movie Star Trek: The Motion Picture,
Hmm.
just a pretty good movie. And he wanted Jesko von Puttkamer, who is a German-born NASA engineer, that it alludes in the letter that because I would learn that I in my research that yeah he went to actually he was sent by NASA to Star Trek conventions to report on them, and he became very good friends with Roddenberry and offered technical support. Well, in the letter back, they're telling Roddenberry like, no, we can't just like give you a guy that you request, and it doesn't work like that. But then it turns out I have no more documentary evidence on what happened, but Puttkamer does end up being a technical advisor to the movie. Brags that he rewrote large portions of the script, did all of this with the blessing of NASA
Hmm.
in an official capacity, and then Roddenberry is celebrated to this day by the agency, especially in connection with like DEI sort of stuff, because Roddenberry was a prophet of space
Oh,
DEI.
good point. Because
Yeah.
all the crew was like aliens mixed with, all kinds of ethnicities and genders and weird green people, right? Oh,
Yeah.
that's a really good point. Yeah, you mentioned in your article DEI and the multiculturalism is a top priority at NASA. And I was thinking like so many space movies have this token multi-ethnic crew, right?
Yes,
Because
indeed. Yeah, they for his 100th birthday, they NASA celebrated with a panel discussion on diversity and inclusion
Mhm.
with regard to space. So, but yeah, Roddenberry had an ongoing relationship. NASA supported the show, the original show, back in the 60s, as did the Air Force. You know, the just like the scope and the dimension of Washington DC's relationship to the entertainment industry. I just don't think people understand it. I don't think until 20 years ago anybody really started to understand it. I mean, if you count individual television shows, we're talking about tens of thousands of productions. NASA alone, I can basically prove that they have given some support or another to like 700 different productions
wow.
at least.
Wow. Do you think Captain Kirk's activities in space is kind of along the lines of panspermia? Because one of the points is that he would go and seduce all of the alien babes all over and like spread his seed throughout the universe.
Well, that was Roddenberry. I mean, he was a serial philanderer and really kind of a scoundrel. And I mean, I think there's, like even people otherwise friendly to him have to admit that he lies all the time. I mean, he takes credit for all kinds of stuff in the show.
Mhm.
I know that like the design of the spaceship and things that he never invented and all sorts of things. He's happy to take credit for things that he had little or nothing to do with. But it's weird to me too that he was he was on the LAPD, right? Wasn't he like he was a detective? Yeah, yeah. He was a detective, and I don't know. It strikes me that Roddenberry is a very spooky kind of deep state-ish figure going way back. I'm not by any means a Roddenberry expert, but
When's the last time you saw Star Trek the motion picture?
I saw it. Gosh, it's probably been 7 or 8 years now. But it's a really important movie in
It
terms
is.
of because they deliberately excised a lot of the religious stuff out of the. In fact, that was like part of the guidelines of the original of the
Mhm.
original show that they just have this sort of like it's like this space religion that reminds you like this sort of hospital chapel, the non-denom sort of that's kind of the religion in Star Trek. But actually, Roddenberry did have some thoughts on religion, and they make their way into the first Star Trek film, and then the fifth one is well, I think the first one was originally called The God Thing. Um,
Well, that's the one with V'ger, right?
V'ger,
Yeah,
yes,
okay. So this is such a crazy plot to me because it's got I can't remember his name, the dad from that Christian show, Seventh Heaven, who turned out to be Creeper.
yeah.
Okay, so he's the star of this episode, and it's all about this entity that comes into the ship and takes over his girlfriend and ends up killing his girlfriend, taking over her body. And it's like an AI type entity that turns out it was actually Voyager that went through a black hole and came back and was V'ger. And at the end, the two merged together in some kind of, marriage of technology and man.
Yeah, no, it's a very transhumanist vision, and it bears
After it
comparison.
murdered his, actual partner and took her body, then he merges with it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely very, sort of cybernetic, transhumanist, religious themes, which in the same sort of category as what you get with Arthur C. Clarke in 2001, and yeah, totally a lot of sort of neo-Gnostic themes in that movie. As in the fifth one as well. Have you ever seen the fifth one where the one that was directed by Shatner?
No.
From like yeah, so they go and they encounter this they're getting messages from this thing that is like calling itself God.
Uh-huh.
And they finally encounter it, but it turns out basically to be the demiurge and a false god, and it appears like the Christian God or Buddha, and it's all gods, but it's actually an evil, jealous sort of entity. Yeah, no, it's Gnostic through and through. Yeah,
And we're gonna get there in a second when we talk about 2001. That's, the Gnostic masterpiece of science fiction. And what's the last thing I was gonna say about Star Trek feature? I don't know. It'll come back to me. But so we're talking about NASA's extensive history of collaborating with the film and television industries. Oh, immortality. That's the thing. So Apollo, these missions, these sci-fi, it's all about immortality through technology. And space is so weird. There is this series that I watched a long, long time ago called, I think it's called Defying Gravity. It didn't make it very far, but at the end, it turned out to be like uh, about merging humanity with space creatures. Yeah.
yeah.
So, why do you think NASA would support a series of productions like this? Like Capricorn One, or the ones that you mentioned where they are portraying the government as like, you know, imbeciles and ineffective, like you were talking about with the day the Earth stood still. So why are they portraying the United States government in a negative light, do you think, in the beginning of these collaborations?
Well, that's the question that Lawrence Seward was confronted with when, he was writing the chapters on and he was investigating NASA's relationship specifically with Hollywood and his cultural history of NASA, because like the kind of paradigm that he had developed in studying and researching the Pentagon relationship to Hollywood, which again I think is a kind of which lacks a lot of nuance and is sort of simplistic. But it's basically like the agencies are trying to burnish their image, and the army wants you to look good and look powerful, and you to put forth. And certain productions like defied that. For example, the original The Day the Earth Stood Still, which got support from Donald Baruch's office, who allowed the National Guard to be used, which not only is a sort of anti-nationalist, pro-globalist film, and not only does it portray, the military as weak and stupid and ineffectual, but it was violating this at that point well-standing policy that the Air Force specifically and the military in general would not cooperate with flying saucer productions.
Yeah, because you said in the 50s, the government had spent a lot of money trying to prove that flying saucers did not exist, and they did not want to perpetuate this hoax, except for the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still, the old one, not the new one.
Yeah, and there are certain exceptions to this rule, but that was from an Air Force memo where the Air Force refused participation on a certain film because we just spent a bunch of money proving that UFOs didn't exist. Why are we going to support them? The interesting thing is though that in many flying saucer movies, as they called them, even the ones that did not get direct support from the Pentagon because of the no UFO rule, often the media people were happy to refer you to Douglas Aircraft or Northrop or
Mm,
or or whatever, right? So you're getting a kind of backdoor support from them. They're not going out of their way to make sure they don't get made or don't get supported. We don't want this out there, but we're not going to be seen supporting it. So that was and so Donald Baruch's answer, by the way, to that, like, because he asked Baruch, like, why did you support the Day the Earth Stood Still? And Baruch's answer makes no sense at all. He says, well, because if there was an alien invasion, then obviously, the military would have to respond, and like, well, then you should support every single one because it
right.
reflects on it just doesn't make any sense. And so when he went to investigate NASA and Hollywood, there was a series of films that simply did not make any sense why NASA supported these. And there were the three that he names over and over again with his interviewees. And it's 1967, Countdown,
Mhm.
which is a Robert Altman film starring James Caan and Robert Duvall. 1969, Maroon, which is a John Sturges film. Starring Gene Hackman and Gregory Peck. Okay, and Capricorn One. Like Capricorn One, if people don't know it, I don't know if Jay's covered it or not.
It's a
Uh,
classic conspiracy moon hoax movie, right?
yes, and see the thing is, people would not know because NASA doesn't want their name in the credits, so people wouldn't ask the questions we're asking right now. Why did NASA support it? Because people didn't know NASA supported it. I'm sure a lot of your audience is shocked to find out that NASA supported it. But yes, I used Marshall Space Center,
Hmm.
so they definitely gave a lot of support to the movie. But in that movie, people don't know it. uh NASA's moved on to phase three, right? Just like in those Tomorrowland films, you have man in space, you go to space. Okay, then we go to the moon, right? What's next is Mars. So we've done the moon, time to go to Mars. And the astronauts are in the craft and they're ready to go to Mars. OJ's suited up, he's ready to go to Mars. But turns out they can't go to Mars. We don't have the technology. So they literally they tell the astronauts at the last minute, okay, you got to get off the spacecraft, we have to fake this, and they're essentially coerced into going along with the hoax and pretending they're in space and calling their family on the phone and doing the rest of it. And then what happens, spoiler alert, is the fakery kind of goes wrong. The re-entry craft burns up, which would mean that the astronauts died. So the astronauts was, oh my goodness, they're going to have to kill us.
Hmm.
And so then they decide to make their escape. Like they're like somewhere out in the California desert or something. And so the rest of the movie is about the NASA administrator having his henchmen hunting these astronauts down like dogs to try to kill them. And yeah, I mean, of course, NASA would want to support a movie like this that portrays them as faking space, evil deep state henchmen. This makes no sense, right? Why would NASA want to support a movie that, okay, so, but Countdown, in the movie Countdown, we're like, so in the popular mind, like this is like height of the space race and the patriotic fervor surrounding the space race, and everybody's waving the flag about going to space. Then we go to space, and we're better than the Soviets and whatever. So in Countdown, the plot is that okay, the Apollo program, they're trying to get to the moon, but they receive intelligence that turns out the Soviets are ahead of us. They're going to get to the moon before us. And so they decide to launch James Caan on a suicide mission to get to the moon before the Soviets can get there. So at least we can say we won the moon race. Okay. And this is a crazy thing to do. It puts, there's, 50-50 or less than 50-50 chance they'll be able to rescue him, but it doesn't matter. We're going to do it anyway. And he gets there at the end of the movie. Again, spoiler alert for everything. He gets there at the end of the movie. The Soviets are already there. They're dead. The whole space race is this is stupid, right? We should be cooperating, right? Now they're dead. He's probably going to be dead. He's running out of oxygen, and it ends with you not knowing whether he's going to live or die. And the message of this is that, okay, space exploration's good, but space race bad. And then this
Hmm.
is a movie that received. This was the largest production, I think, at the time that received just extensive support. Uh, Not only from NASA, but NASA, as Sue explains, that NASA coordinated um, support with Philco and other major, military industrial contractors as well. And then you have Marooned in '69, which is same year as Apollo 11. So in Maroon, it's about the space station, which was the next phase. You were going to have the space station. And in Maroon, the astronauts, Gene Hackman, the other guys, they're on the space station, but something goes wrong. They're not going to be able to get home. There's a technical failure. They're not going to be able to get home. And so NASA has to launch a rescue mission, but the rescue mission also fails. They're not going to be able to save him. They're going to die. But don't worry, the Soviets come and save the day.
Hmm.
It's 1969. It's fully
Hmm.
supported by NASA. Like we're supposed to think that this is
Right. That's
this
kind
is
of counterintuitive to what you'd think they would want the propaganda to be because they're always like portraying the military as stupid, cowardly, impotent, um, hoaxing, and uh, helpless before an extraterrestrial threat.
yeah. In the case of the day, like the day the Earth stood still, and then the remake of the day the Earth stood still, which has gotten support, the Keanu Reeves one, which got support from like the whole government, including NASA. But you see, so the guy in charge of like the guy nominally in charge of making these decisions of when NASA would agree to support a movie or not was a guy named Julian Scheer, who's the head of media operations at NASA at the time. And the policy is almost like the explanation that's given for this is almost more unbelievable than the cooperation. In fact, it is unbelievable. And but it's articulated in this AMPTP memo that I referred to, which is in the record section under SUID related NASA docs, and it says that NASA will uh, it's a memo bringing this meeting of these producers of the major studios. Basically, they get together, NASA, and NASA says their policy is that we'll support anything. Essentially, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the content is.
Uh-huh.
We're not going to censor it. Or it doesn't say that's Scheer himself uses the censorship where he claims that he just was constitutionally against censorship. He was a free speech guy, and he didn't want to restrict people's speech.
Uh-huh.
Like this is the explanation it's given. However, I mean, Scheer is, I don't say this lightly, but Scheer is such a liar. I mean, he claims, for example, that the agency didn't support 2001: A Space Odyssey. And I think I show in spades that 2001: A Space Odyssey received so much support that Kubrick's studio in Bournemouth was called NASA East. In fact, it was a NASA administrator that called it NASA East. But anyway, in the interview with Scheer, when they're talking about Marooned, um, Scheer gives this very rambling explanation that, well, I didn't want to restrict anybody's speech. And Marty Caden, who wrote the novel on which it's based, who would do other collaborations with NASA on the $6 Million Man, for example, which is a show that was dependent on stock footage from NASA and the Pentagon even to exist. He was wrote that show or wrote the source material for that show. And he's a guy I think is sort of deep state connected and is in this sort of cultural engineering complex involving the deep state. And as Scheer says, he knew everybody at NASA, and so he's kind of giving away this has something to do with Marty Caden and forces behind the project. But I found this other memo in another source. I found this older memo where in fact Sheer is saying the things that I'm saying right now, that we should not support this movie because it shows us having a technical failure and being unable to rescue. This reflects really badly on NASA. But he doesn't just tell Seward like, yeah, I was against doing it at the time, but he just pretends that, oh, I don't really remember it, kind of, but it's no big deal. So he's there lying about this, and I don't believe Sheer is actually making the decisions. In short, I think it was coming from Washington.
Mm,
And the
mm,
reason, and I also found that you have a lot of the engineers, a lot of the media heads at like Kennedy Space Center, the local the space centers, they didn't want to cooperate in these movies. But the policy was that if Scheer and Washington said we're going to cooperate with Countdown or Maroon or Capricorn One, you have to go along with it. So it
mhm,
was very much a top-down um,
mm,
sort of thing. But no, we should not believe that they didn't exercise any discretion, that you could just make any movie that you wanted if you were big enough, if you were a big studio, and NASA was going to cooperate. So they've gone out of their way to hide the reasons why they would cooperate with this. But a pattern starts to emerge, and you see it with Countdown and Maroon is globalism. And in fact, Marooned there's you can look on the Wikipedia page on Maroon. There's evidence as proof. I mean, Maroon was actually used as a film to kind of soften up U.S. Soviet relations toward that joint U.S. Soviet initiative
mhm,
in space. And Arthur C. Clarke, uh, who had unbelievable access to NASA, that maybe we'll get into it now or in the next show, that is just defies belief, knew like everybody at NASA, had the run of the facilities, so to speak,
mhm,
at NASA. One of the things he wrote to Seward, in fact, when Seward was asking for interviews, something, he says that he hopes that you'll mention 2010, 2010, which was just then coming out as a movie by Peter Hyams, and he had written that that how that movie sort of realizes the dream that he's or reflects this realization of the dream about U.S. Soviet cooperation in space that he's had all along, and that's subtly built into 2001 and the kind of cold relations between the cosmonauts and the Americans. Not that it's portraying cooperation in space or making the Soviets the good guys, but it's showing that it's like kind of barbaric to still have this Cold War thing going on. Like, and if people have seen the 2010 movie or read the novel, the idea is that there's this joint U.S. Soviet operation, but it's happening during an ongoing Cold War that's about to, it's gonna end up nuking the planet. And why aren't we going and exploring, the other dimension and going into the black monoliths together? And
mhm.
instead we're threatening to nuke each other. So yeah, so NASA has and Tomorrowland and all these things you see, it's a pattern. It didn't start with Clooney and Tomorrowland, and it was already there. I would argue from the Disney stuff from the very beginning. Is there's a globalist agenda. Um, uh, there's a globalist cultural engineering agenda that is really at the crux of NASA's whole relationship to the entertainment industry. And we can argue, or I don't know to what extent NASA just is a part of the entertainment industry or not,
Right. It
but
just seems like they're just another extension of it at this point. And you say that the message that they are saying, especially early on, and they don't call it the International Space Station for nothing, right? Is that the message is that the survival of the species in the face of nuclear technology depends on a sort of globalism and recognition of a galactic federation. And what they're saying is that the national sovereignty is barbaric and stands in the way of our evolution.
yeah, very much so. And speaking of the International Space Station, another example of NASA's cooperation with the moon hoax thing, NASA's involvement in spreading this moon hoax thing. I mean, I think one of the most stunning things I came across is that, so if you look in the lists that I have under the entertainment products that NASA's collaborated with, I came across this Marooned, this music video by Pink Floyd.
Mm,
The music video was released in 2014. It's for
mm,
a song on the Division Bell album from 1994. And this is a sort of another can of worms, but Thomas Millery, the president of the DCF, my colleague, associate editor, wrote an article in the same issue that your Mary Poppins article is in, called "The Digital State," about um, there's this huge number of music videos with globalist kind of propaganda, mind control themes, occultism that were made in Ukraine in the run up to, and I don't know, the decade or so run up to the Russian invasion. And one of these was for Marooned, and NASA supported this video. It's on the list, and there are scenes in the video from the International Space Station, and there's a mirror, and then it's like intercut with scenes from like some bombed out looking building. That there's a big mural of a cosmonaut,
Hmm.
okay, on the building. Now, so this confirms that the song Marooned on the Division Bell album is referring to the 1969 movie Marooned.
Hmm.
A cosmonaut has to come and rescue the crew, and the Soviets are the good guys. And so it turns out that the Division Bell album, when it was released in 1994, there's this some weird military angle to this. I don't know what's behind this, but the release of the album was announced at Naval Air Station Weeksville in North Carolina. Okay, and after the release of the album, the band moved to Norton Air Force Base in San Bernardino, California, to
Hmm.
begin weeks of rehearsal
Hmm.
for their upcoming tour, for the Division Bell tour. Okay, and so Norton Air Force Base was, during Apollo 11, this was home to the Air Force's Audiovisual Center, which was the largest soundstage in the world. In June of 1969, which is just a month before the moon landing event, the Air Force's secret Lookout Mountain facility in Laurel Canyon, it's a region and a place specifically that maybe some of your listeners, viewers may be familiar with, is deactivated. And all of the Laurel Canyon, the secret film studio at Laurel Canyon, all of its equipment was moved to Norton Air Force Base. Okay. And if
Hmm.
you watch the 1992 film Sneakers, which I think we're going
Hmm.
to cover in PsyOp Cinema pretty soon in our surveillance cinema series, in that movie Sneakers, the Dan Aykroyd character, he makes a remark that NASA faked the Apollo moon landings from Norton. So you
Oh,
have
wow.
so you have Pink Floyd
Uh-huh.
rehearsing the Division Bell album, okay, at Norton Air Force Base, as Norton Air Force Base has not been decommissioned yet. It's in the process of being decommissioned, and they have the song Marooned on the album, which the later video is confirming, like, is actually referring to the moon landing Marooned, and with the sort of globalist background. And then anyway, but the Norton Air Force Base, it gets decommissioned on April Fool's Day, April 1st at the time.
Hmm.
So I think this is all part of the mind games and kind of the sick jokes that NASA and the entertainment people have been. And this is the period of Doug Gilmour. By the way, I don't know if people are Pink Floyd fans, but I think Gilmour is the most sauce sort of member of the band. Roger Waters was not in the band at the time. I have a hard time believing that Waters would want to collaborate with the US military and stuff, but I've never got an explanation of what the relationship between Floyd and the military was at the time. But just as another example of that sort of thing.
Hmm. What if there was a plot twist and the moon was actually in low Earth orbit and it was a base for the reptilians built by Conrad Hilton?
Well,
No, I'm just kidding, but
the so Arthur C. Clarke did not believe in aliens, right? He didn't subscribe to the extraterrestrial hypothesis, as I think he called it, or something. But so it's like, how are you supposed to read what the aliens really are? Well, there's two ways to read it, right? And I mean, the aliens in 2001 are kind of the same as the alien in The Day the Earth Stood Still, right? They're these evolved, either the future evolved forms, or they're just sort of the Anglo-American globalist elites
Mhm.
themselves, and their kind of self-image of themselves. I think. I mean, that's another, like, where all that reptilian stuff comes from, and the Nephilim. I mean, again, whether it's true or not, I actually think that these sort of like black aristocracy families and stuff, they've actually spread that myth through their heraldry and through their
Hmm.
inside baseball legends and stuff like that. They've been responsible for spreading it because what does it do to it? Promotes a it promotes their omnipotence.
Right.
Just like NASA supporting these movies that portray the kind of omnipotence of the image making industry. It yeah, I mean, it's sort of it's a form of psychological warfare. If people know that from PSYOP to Mind War, the Michael Aquino, Paul Vallely
Hmm.
treatise on psychological warfare from the early '80s. I mean, basically, the grand strategy of psychological warfare that they articulate in that is that you you become you become more powerful than everybody else by convincing everybody else and yourself that you're omnipotent. That your
Yeah.
the victory is inevitable.
It seems to work too. I see a lot of dum-dums becoming popular just by saying how smart they are and just declaring it and everybody believing it. It's kind of
And
crazy.
it's an inverted thing. I mean, they've cribbed it, I think, basically from Christianity or from their sort of distorted view of Christianity, because as Christians, we believe, right, that Christ already triumphed,
Mm,
over the demons and the forces of darkness, that it's sort of a done deal, and they sort of envy what they've seen as the psycho spiritual power of that, I think. So
mm. So, from the beginning, NASA did not want, number one, to be identified with the military. They wanted to seem like they're a separate entity. Number two, they didn't want any screen credits on projects, but they did help on many movies in the background, you say. And they had support from the Department of Defense and the military, and you say Michael Bay is practically a government employee. So let's talk about Michael Bay movies for a second, because those are some goofy ones, but also Transformers has a lot of esoteric stuff in it.
yeah, I've it's been a while. I watched the first Transformers. I haven't gone through all, but yeah, it's incredible, the globalism, and it's like coming out like a fire hose in those movies. And yes, and NASA support, and I got like a logo agreement for Transformers the last night. It's one of the only other documents besides Space Act agreements and lists that I've got. But yeah, but there was this item on one of the lists that had Michael Bay film TBD, to be determined. Okay. And generally the guidelines of how these different government agencies work with production companies is you have to have like you have to submit a script, you have to have proven distribution, but the rules don't apply to Michael Bay, right? Because he could just be the next Michael, to be determined. And
He's
I've
just pre-approved for a whole bunch of stuff,
well,
right?
because he's basically an employee, he's basically an adjunct
Uh-huh.
of the government. He's worked with so many different agencies. Yeah, I mean, Michael Bay is just an adjunct of the government, as basically Tony Scott um, was as well, until his untimely and somewhat suspicious death. But yeah, everything that Bay does is made in collaboration with multiple, and it's a pattern that you see. Like if NASA supports a movie, the odds are pretty decent that you'll find other agencies of the government that supported it,
Hmm.
as well, because it's a network, it's a club. Um, and that's yeah, and well, I'm getting off track, but I mean that's not even counting this other aspect to it, where there are these consulting firms of, for people that formerly worked in the liaison office at the Marines or the FBI that now have their consulting firms that consult off the book. So just because something doesn't get proven support from the CIA or Department of Homeland Security and whatever, it doesn't mean that it's not part of a network. I mean, I'm just coming to the conclusion that it's just very hard to separate Washington, D.C. and Hollywood.
Hmm. And I mean, Transformers, that has the same type of message where the good AI robots save us from the bad AI robots. And even Optimus Prime, there's a scene where he has to sacrifice himself to save humanity, and he's resurrected again after he dies. And he floats up into space and is like this, doing the like he's on a cross or something. So there's a lot of parallels. Robot Christ, Robo Christ, or whatever. You see that in Wall-E. Transformers, Tomorrowland. Can you think of any more Robo Christs?
I guess in a qualified way, maybe the Matrix
Yeah,
Revolutions
yeah.
movie. But yeah, that's a good point, and it just follows this pattern of misappropriating Christian theology and Christian eschatology in order to hijack it for this religion of the future, right? That involves becoming God through technology and apotheosis and the deification of the self. And yeah, it just follows in this pattern, definitely.
So in the new Day the Earth Stood Still with the Keanu reboot is a little different because he has come to save the Earth by destroying humanity, right? He's not coming to save humanity from any kind of nuclear war and them joining the Galactic Federation.
Right.
Now it's we have to save Gaia from humans, and we're already at the tipping point. Um, I guess at the very end of that movie, he gives us one more chance just because of for the sake of a little child. But there's this message now that we are at the precipice of this great crisis, and the aliens may be coming to intervene on our behalf. What do you think about that?
Yeah,
Oh,
well, I think. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and their plans have to be implemented immediately. Like that is the emergency
Right.
to stave off an even bigger crisis. So when the aliens come and posit this solution, it's gonna have to be like right now.
Yeah, no, this is like pedal to the metal NWO
Yeah.
climate claptrap. But as I think I mentioned Jay there because there's a great line in one of Jay's elite book series or one of his episodes where he makes the observation that when you read these globalist books by Friedhof Capra or whatever, like every one of them says the same thing. Like it begins with and whether it's written in 1960 or 2020, like the world is spinning off its axis. We're in a
Yeah.
crisis, and you must do what we say now to
We're
save
1 minute
to
to
save
midnight on
humanity.
the doomsday clock, right?
We're half a second to mid. We're a
Yeah.
millisecond from midnight. We're begging you. We're begging
Yeah.
you. Um, it's kind of chilling, right? Because there's a veil when you start to realize that these sort of how apocalyptic these people are, like they are the threat. Like maybe they're threatening to do something to us. Like Gil Bates going on television telling us that, laughing that the next virus is we're going to take that very seriously. We're not going to laugh that off. But yeah, it's like if you compare the day the Earth stood still with this one, it's like updated New World Order messaging, and it's also just um just the hatred of humanity is just becoming more and more intense. And, how much longer shall we suffer this humanity that wants to destroy the planet? So the crisis in the old one is nuclear weapons. And so, um, various globalist organizations, what was it, the World Federalist Organization that I mentioned for something that had Cord Meyer of, who was a high official in the CIA and whose name comes up in the JFK assassination stuff. Like if people don't think that they're a globalist in the CIA, look up Cord Meyer. Like he was literally the first president of this organization, which, like a bunch of other globalist organizations in that era, 1950s, 60s, really all the way to the end of the Cold War, they used the nuclear issue was the kind of wedge to why we have to have globalism because we can't have because the nation state is a caveman institution and Ig and Og are going to blow themselves. We're not just fighting with stone hatchets anymore, or we're not even bombing ourselves from there. Now we're going to just blow everything up. We can't do that. We've got to have globalism whether we like it or not. And so that's what you get in the day the Earth stood still is that Klaatu, the enlightened alien, who it's remarked in the movie has a New England accent. We're told, like maybe because he's part of the Eastern establishment. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so many things that they're just like they almost want to say it. It's on the tip of their tongue, but they're just it's too fun to hide it. But yeah, clearly he's Anglo-American, globalist establishment guy, CFR guy, and he says, "Yeah, you're all gonna have to have peace, or else, if they won't give up their nuclear weapons, then the big robot, will have to do bad things to us." And by the way,
Hmm.
there's a power in the first one. There's a mass power outage
Mm.
There's a mass power outage on everybody. Everything goes anyway. Um, but in the new one, yes, it's that Klaatu has not come. Who's played by Keanu Reeves, who's the kind of Hollywood Robo Christ, if you like,
Yeah.
the false because he's always playing these false Christ,
Hmm.
figures from Neo, New Man, right, and Matrix. These, anyway, so yeah, it's because of climate change. Basically, humans are destroying the planet, and the Galactic Federation can't allow that to happen because our planet has some kind of special ecosystem that produces something other. They just can't let it go, so they're going to have to destroy the humans to save the planet. Uh, and yes, but at the press of that, with that thing about at the precipice, we change, right? If we're
Hmm.
threatened enough and the crisis is really brought home to us enough, and we just hammer it, hammer it, hammer it, and maybe we'll change. And then, yes, the Jennifer Connelly character, who's what is it, an astrobiologist or something?
Oh,
I
yeah,
don't know.
some made up BS. I forgot. It was like the study of biology on different planets or something. I was like, that is not even real.
Study moon rocks. Yeah, I
Yeah,
don't
that's
know
not a real
what that
thing.
is. Um, yeah, but anyway, yeah. So she, as a representative of humanity, and the scientists are the good guys. Like she's trying to show, like, look, the John Cleese, he's like the scientists and the children. You know,
Hmm.
like there's good in us too, but we have to declare we're going to change our way of life, right? We have to
Hmm.
declare we're going to change our way of life. We're going to stop the carbon, and then he'll find his humanity and let us live. Yeah.
Well, you pointed out in the Keanu version, they are saying that the real leaders are actually the technocrats. So the government and elected leaders are ineffectual and dum-dums that are killing the planet, but these like super scientist technocracy is what is the class that can bring us back from this catastrophe, right?
Yeah, and Klaatu is either the self-image of the ultimate technocrat, or I mean, if there, I think there, I mean, there are, many of these people have, I mean, I think including like Julian Huxley, they have genuinely like supernatural type beliefs, or it's this like Fred Hoyle theory that these are our super evolved selves that have mastered time travel, that are directing evolution through time loops and
That's Last
maybe.
Mimsy.
Yes, which is also, I believe, a NASA supported a movie which has that creepy spiral
Yeah.
image.
And the
And
little teddy bear. I mean, could there be any more PDF file like
yeah,
Easter eggs in that movie? It was so weird.
yes, indeed. So just a few words as we're getting late in this part one. Hopefully we'll do a part two and talk about 2001.
Oh yeah, because I got
But
all of the look at this is from my
oh
lecture.
yeah, and there's no way you can go down to 2001, but I did a lot of research on 2001: A Space Odyssey. So Matt Alford, a gentleman that I mentioned, who's one of the top researchers into the whole Hollywood DC thing, whom I interviewed in part two of the magazine for a different book that he did. Um, so the Stanley Kubrick archives are in England. Matt is in England. I couldn't go to England on on company funds to get into the Kubrick archives. But we sent Matt there, and the Kubrick family does not let you take anything out of there. They don't let you make any photocopies. And a lot of these are like records that should be public domain in the United States. They're NASA related records. So I think somebody should actually look into that. But the whole Kubrick archive thing is in some ways to me about shielding this information from researchers. It's not
Mhm.
about preserving it. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, because you said you could look at it if you can come there, right?
Yeah,
That was
but I got Matt to go and make a report. They let you examine documents, and this one of these documents in particular that we can discuss, where is a really kind of crystalline view into what the state of Kubrick's thinking about these themes was at the time. But I just also going into like the Fred Ordway interview in the Lawrence Seward files. Fred Ordway, the NASA engineer who was the chief consultant on the movie, and going through Seward's manuscript, and Fred Hoyle wrote a retrospective about the making of the movie, and just a staggering number of military industrial contractors, NASA, U.S. agencies, and it's Arthur C. Clarke is the fulcrum of all of that, who's coordinating on this whole thing. But really, if you want to get into the the religion of the future, the sort of Luciferian religion of the future that's driving, this agenda of the globalist elites. It's 2001: A Space Odyssey is like Exhibit A. But so when I was making all these FOIA requests initially, I mean, that was my first strategy, is like, let me start making FOIA requests and figure out, what stuff NASA has worked on. I'm surprised because a lot of agencies drag their feet, or like literally the CIA, by the way, has never sent me anything back except acknowledgments and the standard, we're not going to meet the statutory time limit and anything. I've been doing this for 2 years, and every agency except the CIA has given me like at least something.
Hmm.
But NASA was actually pretty fast and sending stuff and back to me, and these lists and stuff. And I got these long lists of collaboration. I thought, okay, well, I'll just go like one at a, I'll start with feature films. I'll just go one at a time, and I'll start asking, I'll start, FOIAing all the documents associated with them. And I got back no responsive documents for a bunch of them. That doesn't make sense. Like, how are you generating a list if there's no documents by which you made this list? Well, finally, actually, their FOIA person put me in contact with Bert Ulrich, who's the head of the multimedia liaison, and has been since 2005. And basically, the office was created under him. And they put me in contact with them because they're like, listen, it would be easier if you just didn't make all these requests. It's tying up a lot of agency time. We'll just give you like whatever we'll give you. And I'm like, okay, well, send me all the Space Act agreements. And but I want to understand, like, if you didn't sign a Space Act agreement, what is your level of cooperation with these various productions? There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, TV shows, TV documentaries, feature films, you name it. Um, and he said, okay, well, there's three kinds, and it's on the list. Like, there's three kinds of support. Basically, they let you, well, they will let you use facilities. They'll send you stock footage, technical advice. There's sort of, okay, so there's different types of support, but it doesn't specify what support for which one. And I'm just asking, I tried to, it took me a long time. He's a very slippery guy. It took me a long time even to kind of frame the question to him, like, how did you generate these lists? Like, where do you must know, because he wanted to downplay it to me and say, like, don't read too much into it,
Hmm.
which I ended up, and I never trusted what he was telling me. And then I found he was on the official podcast of the Johnson Space Center. And for the year, I think it's 2016, which incidentally is the one year I don't have a list for, he's bragging on there at the very thing he's trying to downplay to me. Like, don't make too much of however many productions we supported or what we did was probably very minimal. He's playing that up, saying, look what a great job my office has done. We supported 158 productions. He's absolutely bragging about it and saying the opposite on there of what he's saying to me.
Uh-huh.
Okay. But anyway, to make a long story short, he says, look, you're not going to find out. I don't even know, and you're not going to find out what kind of support we gave to each individual production, because that was all, the lists were generated from my emails, and all of my emails were lost in a hard drive erasure in 2021.
Oh, with the moon tapes,
Just
probably.
like the moon tapes, the
Yeah.
hard drive, the hard drive was lost. You're not going to, he said, we wouldn't give it to you anyway. And
They
even if we
taped
had
over
it,
Murder, She Wrote on top of the information you want.
so that's where we stand with it. And I had to go to Lawrence Seward to get and Seward's research pretty much covers the birth of the agency up to at some point in the 80s. Now, one of the clues that Ulrich did give me was that if you see the NASA logo I mean, this is theoretically true for the history of the agency, certainly back to the 80s. If you see the genuine NASA logo, not a knockoff, but the real NASA logo,
Hmm.
theoretically, they had to get a licensure from the agency to do that. They had to get permission from the agency to do that. And so I think we can conclude with a pretty high degree of certainty that Flight of the Navigator, for example, was made with the support of the agency, because it has the NASA logo. It's made by Disney. It's NASA's all over everything
Uh-huh.
in the movie. And if it's really weird that NASA supported Countdown and Marooned and Capricorn One, it's just bizarre why they would support a movie that has a NASA research facility experimenting on a child, MK
Yeah.
Ultra style. Like, how do we explain this one?
Well,
Um,
that's a weird one. I want you to go into detail in the next part. But I did learn something about the NASA logo. So there's two main kinds. There's the worm and the meatball.
Yep.
right?
Right.
And the worm was the like the red on white, where it's very flowy, like I said, NASA. And the meatball is the blue ball with the red arrow in it, right?
Yeah, that's right. And what's weird is that okay, so the guy who made the worm logo is the same person that designed the bicentennial logo
Mm.
of 1976. And you see in the NASA research facility in Flight of the Navigator, you see both of those. And then in Space Camp, like one of the very first shots of the film is this building. You know, this is 1986. Now, Flight of the Navigator is partly set in 1978, so that would explain why maybe you see the bicentennial logo, but like Space Camp isn't. It's just set in the 80s. And for
Hmm.
some reason, you see the bicentennial logo and the NASA worm logo. I don't know what to make of it, but it's just added confirmation that it's the genuine logo. Um,
Do you remember Nickelodeon and their game show prizes would always include some kind of trip to space camp? Like if you won Double Dare or those kids game shows, one of the cash and prizes, it was always like you get to go to space camp.
yeah, and one of the things I discuss in part of the article is this troubling fixation on youth, right, in NASA media project, this obsession with youth. And I remember for a brief period of time, I went to this private school in Baton Rouge before we moved, and then I went to public schools. But I remember getting NASA would send stuff in the mail to all the kids. I remember getting like space ice cream in the mail,
Hmm.
freeze dried ice cream.
Dippin' Dots.
No, it wasn't Dippin' Dots. It's
Oh, it
freeze
wasn't.
dry, like dry. It's very good. If you ever get it, you
Oh,
can still
okay.
get it if you go to Houston or something, the airport. You can
Uh-huh.
get that freeze dried, like chalky ice cream. It's really good.
Okay.
And the fifth graders, you came to the end of your grade school education. The fifth graders got to take a trip to NASA.
Hmm.
Um, was a thing. So yeah, I think there's a disturbing kind of undertone to all that to me after everything I've learned.
Well,
Uh,
we're gonna figure out why they're into kids in the next part, because you said an alien invasion would constitute the ultimate transformational crisis needed to usher in the globalist New World Order. But the government speaks out of both sides of its mouth on this subject, denying existence while also promoting a hoax. And I'm sure you follow these things too. There's always somebody addressing Congress about space or aliens or invasion, and it just seems to blow over people's heads. Like they're like, "Oh yeah, UFOs are coming out of the water in Daytona," and no one cares.
Well, yeah, actually, the Collins brothers, who have published up in both issues of Cultural Journeying Studies magazine, and they've done the best work on this deception through disclosure, to quote the title of one of
Oh,
their
okay.
articles. And on the DCF website, we've been putting up. They publish most of their stuff. A lot of their stuff was on this website called Conspiracy Archive, which went down, and their research is really unparalleled on the military and the intelligence and the CIA and the deep state connections to all of ufology. I mean, it's been a psychological warfare campaign from the word go. It connects into that whole John Ronson, Men Who Stare at Goats world, and Colonel Alexander, and I mean the whole Roswell thing is really partly created by a CIA agent, the
Hmm.
hoax, and I can't really do justice to it now, but we've recently been republishing that stuff. And they wrote it over the course of a decade and more. There's I don't know how many we've got now, like 10 articles up, and I understand they're working on some additional entries in their series on deception through disclosure and fire in the firmament. And so that's really the place I would send people to get up to speed on the whole alien deception, especially the deception through disclosure thing, because yeah, this is a giant psyop uh,
And
to
you
get brass tacks.
you call this a form of red pill programming, so feeding you false truth pills, right? Or red pills, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, and an example of that is Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And Spielberg claimed that NASA wrote him a 28-page letter warning him not to make the movie. And it was, and I FOIA there. I don't believe there is any letter, right? I think he's
Yeah.
totally made that up. But yes, this is the strategy that you often find is that people are encouraged to believe in this because the government is hiding something from you. The government is covering it up. And when you start to see that the government is spreading that narrative, just that NASA is spreading the moon hoax narrative, whether they landed on the moon or not. That's coming out of the phone call is coming from inside the house, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it's been coming from the government. That whole thing has been coming from, and I mean, look, what's his name? Christopher Mellon and these people who was the former Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence from the famous Mellon family, which has funded all this occult research and all this. We're supposed to believe that. So then you have the sort of white hat narrative, right? The sort of QAnon narrative that these are white hats in the government who want to
Hmm.
reveal to us all the crypto tech and stuff like that. No, this is just part of the psyop.
Well, you
Um,
just mentioned in your article Mirage Men. That's a really good documentary about disclosure and lies and psyops inside that.
Yeah, and yeah, Richard Doty is it's proof of what we're talking about. He was an Air Force counterintelligence officer, and you can believe that he's still operating as an Air Force counterintelligence officer, and he's still spreading disinformation. But whether he's telling the truth or spreading disinformation, it proves that at least a huge component of the UFO alien thing is a psyop. But it's interesting that yeah, there was this policy back in the 50s and 60s. There was the no UFO policy under Donald Baruch's office at the Pentagon not to support UFO movies. And then apparently, if you believe Spielberg, there was some such policy with NASA. But we've come around to the government more or less openly supports UFO movies, including, I mean, the new The Day the Earth Stood Still movie. It makes the government, I guess, look a bit slicker and more competent, but it still basically makes them helpless, right, in the face of this alien
Mm.
threat with superior
Hmm.
technology. So it's not exactly something that you would expect, you know, flag waving patriots to support. But that's not, as we understand, that's not who really runs the upper echelons of the military. So it's like they're even beyond, trying to pretend. I think that.
Yeah. UFOs are above top secret, right? They're like,
Yeah, and I mean that like that, the Witch Mountain movie with The Rock that came out
uh-huh.
that NASA, that's on that list of NASA support. I think other agencies supported that and
So you talk about the UFO psyop in three stages leading to globalism. So the first layer or the outer layer is the message of we need globalism because the bad aliens will invade us. So this is your Star Wars, Reagan, super threat that will unite us and make us put aside our petty differences, right?
yeah, and I think my friend Thomas Millery sums that up very well. So I just quoted him and there, but I mean like you could say there's two or really three kinds of alien movies.
Hmm.
There's like Independence Day, the aliens are coming to harvest us,
Starship Troopers.
to serve man, the Twilight Zone sort of thing. And then we've got the day there. So still the aliens are coming to inaugurate us into the Galactic Federation and to enlighten us. And then we've got, the aliens are beyond good and evil. The aliens are, whatever transdimensional beings. But the answer is always globalism in every
Hmm.
case. Like we've got to come together to fight the bad aliens, or we need to follow the good aliens into the Galactic Federation. I think when you get in 2001 and certain other ones, I think really is the deepest layer of this, is the Luciferian layer of it, is that the aliens are these transmoral super beings that are beyond good and evil and uh, I think that's really where it's all going ultimately.
You just reminded me of something I wanted to show you. Remember E-Bombs World?
I do, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So, I was remembering the military patches, for like missions and space missions. They were really creepy. I don't know if you've ever like scrolled through a collection of these things. But so go to E-Bombs World, 26 terrifying military patches from covert operations, but you just were talking about To Serve Man. Now, that was an old Twilight episode where they hosted the aliens because they thought that they were here to like serve us, but they were actually here to cook us, like serve them and as eating. But check this out. Can you see that? That's an actual military.
Yeah, and actually
To
the
serve man.
Cohen brothers, the Collins brothers, they actually, if I remember one of the articles, they show a bunch of these really creepy patches.
Yeah. I'm looking at them right now. So go scroll through these and they're all a bunch of ghoulies, gray aliens. Look, here's like a dragon on top of the world.
Yes.
What else we got? Grim Reapers. Whatever this guy is. What is that?
Oh, that's from Spy
Spy
versus
versus, yeah.
Spy. Yeah, Mad Magazine.
He's like in the space with a globe. What else we got? Three three serpents? I know it's not focusing very good, but yeah, so just go check these out. There's like more than 20. Here's another gray alien.
Hmm.
What does this thing mean? I don't know.
Yeah, we've got an all-seeing eye, Omega, and lightning bolt. Yeah, Jack Parsons is alive and well, and
It, and it says alone and unafraid. What does that mean? Right? So yeah, go peruse these occult thingies. Yeah, so the outer layers, like we need them because the bad ones, and then the middle layer is we need to be initiated into the good galactic brotherhood. Right? We have to put our petty differences aside so that we can become what they call a type 1 civilization. Have you ever heard of that before?
yes, I have heard that one
So
before. Yeah.
this was going around back in when I was like heavily into aliens and stuff, and I was like, yeah, we're gonna be a type 1 civilization when we transcend our nationalism and we all recognize that there's aliens out there that want us to join them, but we just have to like have the same vibration and whatever woo-woo stuff they would say. But yeah, what do you think about aliens are space brothers? That's what the Pope said.
Yeah, but I mean, you get to level three with, Arthur C. Clarke's, well, not the truth, I wanted like Childhood's End, where the aliens or the overlords are literally depicted as basically the reference of the fallen angels who literally look like devils, and they've come to uh, get rid of all the adults and, basically trauma-based mind control all the kids into having psi superpowers.
Hmm.
And Stanley Kubrick was absolutely under the influence of Arthur C. Clarke in this period, and I would almost describe him as a disciple of basically in this period, as we'll see.
Yeah, so the end game of these programmings are aliens are gods beyond good and evil. They're part of our evolution. They might be us in the future, like you said. If it's not a metaphor for the elite and technocrats, then they think that they can travel in time now and they're helping themselves from the future. And then you say that Obama even discussed new religions popping up due to the disclosure of alien life.
Yeah, and isn't that, I mean, my memory is being jogged here. Like, isn't that the thing in the Tomorrowland movie with Clooney too, that, like some people are going to get left behind, a lot of them, but if you want to join Tomorrowland, then you can be one of us.
Yes.
If not, if you still want to drive a gas car and eat red meat and be part of a, type C civilization, then, we can't suffer you much longer. But yeah, and Obama is just echoing this refrain that we've heard from other, including from Reagan, right? That, oh, if the aliens came, wouldn't that transform all of our institutions
Hmm.
for the better? This is you don't report from Iron Mountain, by the way. This kind of well-known conspiracy document that's sort of in that, and that's another story. Like, is that a real thing, or is it a hoax, or is it a real thing, but maybe a hoax, or something like that? But
Yeah.
it's looking forward to the end of the Cold War, and the idea is that you have to have some kind of looming threat in order to maintain functionality and stability in society. And there's a section of it that's brainstorming about the alien deception thing. Like, we can convince people that the Independence Day aliens are hovering over us to do the trick.
Well, I'm just thinking of these space cults like what was the Hale Bop guys and
Heaven's Gate.
Applewhite and those um like we've always had spacey cults and they're always associated with like unaliving yourself, right? And talking to Sirius. Now, Esalen Institute, which we're going to talk about next time, that whole thing was set up also to get people to channel beings from Sirius. I don't know if you've heard that before.
No, no, I haven't heard that. But yeah, if we get into I've talked about this NASA Hollywood thing on some other show. I haven't gotten into Douglas Trumbull, but this is the guy who designed the Stargate sequence from 2001, who becomes a really important link between NASA and the aerospace industry on the one hand, Kubrick and the UFO alien deception thing as well.
So this is all towards the Luciferian transhumanist core ideology, like you said, and one of its main proponents is Arthur C. Clarke, who was a student of Alfred Kinsey. Um, and we're going to get into all that next time because we're already going on 2 hours, and I think we have 2 hours more in us about
Yeah,
this topic. If you are down, I am down to have a part two very soon, maybe in the next like week or so, if that's good for you.
yeah, totally.
And we're going to be talking about Arthur C. Clarke, 2001, OTO, science fiction, life in the 21st century, childhood's end, science fiction and sexuality, the monolith, the UN meditation room, all of those things that you mentioned in your article. I have tons of notes, and this is going to be a special treat for y'all because this is stuff I haven't even talked about before. This was information from my live talk that's going to become my book called The All-Seeing Eye, which I'm working on right now. So we're going to get a taste of the transhuman sci-fi sex part in
The All-Seeing AI, right?
The
The
All-Seeing
All-Seeing
AI.
AI.
Yeah.
Oh. Great
All-Seeing
title.
AI. So thank you, Brett, for the whole preamble up to the juicy stuff we're gonna get to next time. Your articles were so good, as are all the articles in cultural engineering studies. Everybody go get a copy, and I'm in the first issue. I'm not in the second one, but I will be in the third one talking about Pinocchio. So
Great.
thank you, Brett, for coming and tell us where we can find your stuff.
Okay. Well, Decoding Culture Foundation's decoding-culture.com. That's the main website. You can get a link to the magazine. The magazine is called Cultural Engineering Studies, which is the official magazine of the Decoding Culture Foundation. You can get to the magazine from there. I also do PsyOp Cinema, the podcast PsyOp Cinema with
One of my favorites.
thank you. Yeah, we've collaborated with Jay several times, been on his show. He's come on our show. Hope to do it again. And we have a Patreon page for PsyOp Cinema. I do a series on Monarch mind control films. I've done 15 episodes so far. My most recent one was on Labyrinth.
Oh,
Uh,
perfect.
and Thomas is doing a series in the midst of a Patreon series on PsyOp Mario Center. So Mario Media, and
Like Super Mario?
he just did one on the 1993 Mario movie,
Oh,
which
that
has
one has reptilians in it
it
and,
does it has
and psychedelic mushrooms.
it has
Yeah,
9/11 predictive
yes.
programming.
Yeah.
It has all kinds of stuff in it. So
Awesome.
yeah. We're doing an Oliver
Awesome.
Stone. We're in the midst of an Oliver Stone series in the main feed right now, and other things we're doing like a surveillance cinema series. We did one on Enemy of the State. We did like a 3 hour long one with our friend Stephen DeLay. Next, I think that movie Sneakers that I mentioned, which is one of the few movies that mentioned the NSA uh, before the 9/11 event.
Mm.
We're doing so. We stay very busy.
Yes, great work. And you're some of our favorite lone gunmen's. So keep up the good work, and we'll see you next time with clapping alien cheeks.
Okay, thanks, Jamie.
Bye.